I don't think I'll ever forget the exact second the air in that room changed. Not the dramatic movie kind. No thunder, no slow-motion glass shattering. It was subtler than that, like someone quietly unplugged the part of me that still believed family meant safety. The words were familiar, the tone was familiar, but this time, something didn't bend in me the way it always did. It started with my brother's voice, loud and bitter, the kind of loud that isn't confidence. It's desperation wearing a mask. "You're the reason this family is falling apart," Mason shouted, face flushed, eyes bright like he'd been rehearsing the line in his head for days. Then my dad, standing across from me with his arms folded like I'd wandered into the wrong house, gave the finishing blow in a voice that wasn't loud at all. That was what made it worse. He said it like an observation. "We'd all be better off without you." I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't slam the door, I made sure of that. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me crack or making a scene they could later retell with me as the villain. I just walked out. And the next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls from the hospital. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because nothing like this ever happens out of nowhere. It's not a single explosion. It's 1,000 small leaks you ignore until the house is flooded and you can't pretend it's fine anymore. My name's Connor. I'm 26. And for most of my life, I've been the background character in my own family. Not the golden child, not the problem child, not the one everyone worried about or bragged about, just there. The kid you could count on to be quiet, the kid who did what he was supposed to do and didn't ask for too much space. I was the kid who got straight B's and never caused trouble. I didn't crash cars, I didn't sneak out, I didn't scream at the dinner table or slam doors or start fights in public. I thought being easy would make me lovable. It didn't. Because in my family, love was loud. Love was attention. Love was look at him, look at what he did, look how special he is. And my older brother Mason was always loud. He's 28, 2 years older than me, and he walks through life like it owes him interest payments. He has this talent, this natural gift for turning every room into a stage. If someone's laughing, he did it. If someone's angry, he provoked it. If someone's uncomfortable, he calls it being too sensitive. My parents, especially my dad, treated Mason like a prophecy. Like he was destined for greatness just because he took up so much oxygen. Mason played varsity football in high school. He sat the bench most games, but it didn't matter. He wore the jersey, he belonged to the story my dad wanted to tell the world. So Mason got the praise. Mason got the photos on the wall. Mason got the "that's my boy" shoulder squeezes. Meanwhile, I was in my room teaching myself how to build websites and edit videos. I was learning code in little bursts between school and part-time jobs. I landed my first freelance gig at 17. Nothing glamorous, just a local barber who wanted a website and a small promo video. I remember showing my mom the first payment notification on my phone, proud like I'd discovered fire. She smiled, said, "That's nice, honey," and went back to whatever Mason was doing in the other room. Eventually, even the quiet achiever compliment disappeared, because when Mason dropped out of college and declared he wanted to start a business, suddenly my family found a new religion. They called him brave. They called him ambitious. My dad co-signed a loan. When I tried to formalize my own work, registered an LLC, built a portfolio, took on real clients, my dad told me to wait until I had real experience. Real experience. Like being a 22-year-old CEO of absolutely nothing. That was the rule in our house. Mason's chaos was potential, my stability was suspicious, I moved out as soon as I could afford it. Not in a dramatic, "I'm never speaking to you again" way. More like an exhale. Like stepping out of a room where the music had been too loud for too long, I still came back for birthdays, for holidays, for the stuff people called important. Even when it was awkward, even when Mason found new little ways to poke me. He'd call me the intern in front of relatives. He'd laugh at my clothes. Always something like, "Connor dresses like he's afraid of fabric." He'd ask if I was still playing YouTube for money, even though I had clients and contracts and invoices like an actual adult. And my parents? They never stepped in. They smiled. They let it slide. Sometimes my dad would even laugh like Mason was doing me a favor by toughening me up. This year, something started getting worse. I don't know if Mason snapped, or if I finally stopped numbing myself. Maybe both. But it started showing up in little humiliations that were so small you couldn't point to one and call it abuse. It was just erasure. I'd show up and find my seat taken. No one would offer coffee. No one would ask how I was doing unless it was in that fake, shallow way that comes right before they pivot to someone else. But if Mason needed help moving a couch or setting up his new computer, suddenly I was useful again. Suddenly my skills were worth acknowledging. Then the moment passed and I went back to being invisible. The tipping point started a few weeks before everything blew up. It was my dad's birthday. Big backyard party. Steaks on the grill. Beer. Loud jokes. The usual ritual of masculine bonding that somehow always turned into a comedy show where I was the punchline. I showed up with a gift I'd actually thought about. Custom cufflinks engraved with his initials and a small quote from his favorite author. It wasn't expensive. It was personal. It was me trying to say, "I see you." He opened the box, stared at them for 2 seconds and said, "Huh, that's different." Then he set them down and moved on like I'd handed him a grocery receipt. Half an hour later, Mason arrived late, like he always did, carrying a box of Cuban cigars. and my dad lit up. He acted like Mason had brought him a piece of the moon. "Now that's my boy," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mason grinned like a magician watching the trick land. I was used to it, mostly. But what happened after is what stuck under my ribs like a splinter. I was helping my mom bring out dessert when Mason started telling a story about how I cried in gym class in middle school because I couldn't climb a rope. Total lie. Completely fabricated. Everyone laughed anyway. Like laughter was automatic, like the story didn't even need to be true, as long as it put me beneath him. My parents laughed too. No one looked at me. I stood there holding a tray of lemon squares like an idiot, smiling in that tight way you smile when your body is trying to protect your dignity with a flimsy paper shield. When I set the tray down, my dad smirked and said, "You always were sensitive, Connor." And something in me, quietly, privately, went cold. After that night, I pulled back. I ignored a few texts, skipped a Sunday dinner, not as revenge, not as a statement. I just needed air. I needed my own brain back. But in families like mine, distance isn't interpreted as self-preservation. It's interpreted as betrayal. 2 days before the dinner that finally broke everything, my mom called with that guilt voice, soft, wounded, practiced. "Have you forgotten you're part of this family?" she asked. Then she said Mason was worried about me, which was laughable. When I didn't take the bait, she asked me to come for dinner Friday night, just the four of us. "It'll be nice," she said. "We can reset." Against my better judgment, I said yes, because even after everything, some stupid part of me still wanted to believe in reset buttons. Dinner was tense from the moment I walked in. The food was fine. My mom always made a solid roast, but the room felt like it was waiting for a match. Mason sat on his phone half the time. My dad sipped beer and watched us like he was waiting for the show to start. I tried to keep it light, asked about my mom's garden, mentioned a project I was excited about, a new client, a brand redesign, something that actually mattered to me. Blank stares, grunts. Then Mason looked up barely and said, "Sounds like a lot of time to waste on something no one's ever going to see." I told him calmly that I had steady clients, that I made decent money, that I was even thinking of renting a bigger place next year, and my dad laughed. Short, dismissive. "So you finally gonna get a real job?" Something snapped in me. Not in the dramatic, screaming way they probably expected, more like a quiet cable finally fraying after years of tension. I set my fork down, pushed my plate forward, and I asked, "Why do you even invite me if everything I do is a joke to you?" That's when Mason leaned in like he'd been waiting for the opening. "Because you need to hear the truth for once," he said, voice rising. "You're the reason this family's falling apart." My mom stared at her plate like it had the answer written in gravy, and my dad nodded slowly like he was agreeing with the weather forecast. "He's right," he said. "We'd all be better off without you." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't beg. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and walked out. It was dark when I got back to my apartment. I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying the words, the casual cruelty of them, the way they fell out of my dad's mouth like it was nothing. I ignored every call and text that came in that night. Then came morning, 12 missed calls, all from the hospital. No names, just the same generic caller ID repeating over and over like an alarm I slept through. I didn't feel fear at first, just confusion, dull confusion, like my body woke up before my mind did. Then the text from my mom landed like bricks. "Connor, please call me. Something's happened. It's your dad." That line hit different. I didn't respond right away. I sat on the edge of my bed while sunlight crept through the blinds like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had. Because the truth is, I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel anything. And realizing that scared me more than the hospital call. Eventually I called, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know. A nurse answered, polite and detached. The kind of calm you develop when emergencies are just part of your shift. She said my dad had been brought in with chest pain, possible heart attack, stable now, under observation. They were contacting family in case things changed. I thanked her and hung up, and still, no part of me moved to rush over. Instead, I sat in silence, letting the irony bloom like a bitter flower. Less than 12 hours after telling me the family would be better off without me, his heart had given out in his sleep. I don't say that with triumph, just with that strange, stunned observation you get when the universe makes a joke you weren't ready to hear. An hour later, Mason called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short and clipped, like he was reciting a script. "You need to come. Dad's asking for you." That was new. My dad never asked for me, not when I moved out, not when I graduated, not when I landed my first big client and sent him a video I was proud of. But now, when he was wired to monitors and his mortality was staring him down, now he remembered my name. I didn't go that day. Instead, I cleaned my apartment. I scrubbed counters until my hands smelled like lemon chemicals, vacuumed under the couch, organized cables behind my desk. It wasn't about cleanliness, it was about control, about proving to myself there was at least one space in the world where I wasn't invisible. By evening, Mason called again, then again. My mom too. I turned my phone off and went for a walk. Cold wind, empty streets, my footsteps echoing in the quiet. I thought thought about how many years I'd shown up out of guilt, only to leave feeling smaller. How many times I'd swallowed my own discomfort because I didn't want to be sensitive. I thought about holding that tray of lemon squares like a peace offering. I thought about my dad's smirk, and I realized something ugly. I'd been trained to accept crumbs and call it a meal. The next morning, I caved and went to the hospital. Not because I forgave him, not because I missed them, because I needed to see him, to look at the man who'd said those words and find out if I still saw a father or just a stranger wearing a title. Hospitals have a specific smell, clean and sterile and slightly metallic, like the air itself is tired. I walked into the room and saw my dad hooked to machines, eyes closed, face slack with exhaustion. My mom sat beside him, mascara smudged, hands clenched together like a prayer she didn't quite believe in anymore. Mason stood in the corner with his arms crossed, avoiding eye contact like the room itself accused him of something. When I walked in, my mom looked up like I'd brought oxygen. "Connor, thank you for coming." Mason nodded once. Barely. I didn't sit. I stayed near the door, coat still on, like my body refused to settle into that space. After a long silence, my dad opened his eyes, groggy, unfocused. Then his gaze landed on me. "Connor," he croaked, voice thin. "You came." I waited for an apology, for regret, for anything that didn't feel like someone trying to tidy up their conscience while still holding the knife. He swallowed and said, "I didn't mean what I said, and I wanted to believe that. I really did, but something in me recognized the hollowness before it hit the floor." "I think you did," I said quietly. "You just didn't think it would echo back." He flinched, not much, but enough. My mom jumped in fast, like she'd been trained to cushion my dad from consequences. "He wasn't thinking clearly, Connor. He was upset. You know how he gets when—" "I know exactly how he gets," I interrupted. "I've known since I was 10. Silence again. The heart monitor beeped steadily, like it didn't care about our family mythology. I stayed 5 minutes, maybe 6, then I turned and left. That should have been the end of it. Me walking out again, this time for good. But that night, something changed. I got a text from my cousin Sarah. We weren't super close, but she was one of the few relatives who always treated me like a full human. Her text was simple. "Hey, just checking on you. Heard what Mason did, that's messed up." I blinked, reread it. "What Mason did?" I replied. "What do you mean?" The typing dots appeared, disappeared, then the bomb landed. "You didn't hear? He told everyone you refused to come to the hospital unless Dad promised to put you in the will." My stomach dropped. I called her immediately. She picked up in a hushed voice. "I'm at Aunt Linda's," she whispered. "Mason's here telling everyone you're blackmailing your way back into the family, like you threatened them, like you only showed up for money." My hands went cold. Not because Mason lied, I expected that, because of how easily everyone believed it. I hadn't said a word about money. I didn't want anything from them. I barely wanted to be in the same room with them. But Mason knew narrative was power. He knew silence could be turned into motive. Sarah kept talking, voice shaking with anger. "He said you've always been jealous, that you hate him for being successful." I laughed once, bitter and sharp. Successful. Mason's success was mostly loans my dad co-signed and confidence built on other people's patience. Sarah exhaled hard. "I know," she said, "but you know how it is. They eat up whatever Mason says. He's the good one. Always has been." And that line, "always has been," did something to me. It wasn't rage, it was resolve. That night, I didn't sleep. I dug out an old hard drive and started organizing everything. Contracts, invoices, screenshots, emails, voice memos. Not because I wanted to fight, because I was tired of being erased. I didn't even know yet how I'd use it. I just knew I wanted the truth lined up like bricks, airtight, unmovable. And then, the next afternoon, I got another call. Not from my mom, not from Mason, from the hospital billing department. "Hi, is this Connor Reynolds?" a woman asked, polite and chipper like we were discussing a cable package. "Yes. This is a courtesy call to confirm charges for your father's procedure. We have a card on file under your name and we just wanted to—" "I didn't provide a card," I said. Pause. "It's listed under your name," she said slowly. "Same address we have for the emergency contact." She read the address, my old address, the one I lived at before Mason moved in after I left. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. "Do not process anything," I said. "That card is not authorized." I hung up and sat there, staring at my wall, like it was going to explain how my life got this absurd. Mason had used my identity to attach me to my dad's hospital bill. Maybe to look like a hero, maybe to make me look guilty later, maybe both. That's when the pieces clicked. The smear campaign, the will lie, the fraudulent charge. This wasn't dinner table cruelty anymore. This was war, and Mason had escalated it into something with consequences that didn't care about family politics. The next few days passed in a fog. I barely worked, barely ate, slept in broken chunks. Mason texted once, "Just cleaning up your mess, little bro. You're welcome." Like he was doing me a favor while committing identity fraud. My mom texted too, as if we were having a normal family disagreement. "Your dad's home now, recovering. We need to put this behind us and come together, like we were arguing about Thanksgiving turkey, not watching a family collapse under manipulation and selective memory. Then the hospital form arrived in the mail, and the signature wasn't even close to mine. It was laughably bad. Big loopy letters trying to mimic my writing, but inconsistent, sloppy, rushed. Mason didn't even bother to do it well. He thought I'd roll over. He always did. That was the moment something finally shifted all the way into place. Not revenge, not vengeance. Clarity. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Truth. Then I built it like a case file. Every voicemail, every screenshot, every passive-aggressive email, every time Mason twisted my words. I pulled my LLC filing dates, invoices and tax receipts, proof of my real address and bank info, and I started writing. Not a rant, not a woe is me, just my story, clean, factual, chronological. For the first time in my life, I stopped editing myself to make them comfortable. While I was doing that, something else happened too, something I didn't expect. I started remembering who I was without them. The version of me that got excited about work, the version that felt proud after a good project, the version that didn't walk into every room bracing for humiliation. I reached out to an old client, asked if they needed any new video work. They said yes. Within a day, I was back in that flow, editing, arranging, building something clean and real. One gig turned into two, then a referral, then another. I didn't advertise, I didn't post. It just happened the way good things happen when you stop bleeding energy into people who don't deserve it. I started going to the gym again, changed my diet, slept better, cleaned out old junk from my apartment like I was clearing out old versions of myself. I even booked a weekend trip alone. Small cabin, no Wi-Fi, no noise. I hiked and journaled and sat in silence until I finally heard my own thoughts again. And out there, with nothing but wind and trees and my own breathing, I realized something that felt almost holy. I don't need them, not their approval, not their permission, not even their love, not the version of love they were capable of giving. What I needed was my voice, my story, my strength. When I came back from that trip, I knew what I was going to do. Mason's power came from controlling the narrative, so I was going to take it away, but not with drama, with documentation. I remembered something I'd installed a year earlier at my old place, a cheap motion-activated security camera above the front door. I put it in after a package theft. It's uploaded to the cloud and also saved to an SD card. When I moved out, I forgot to take it down, and Mason didn't notice things that weren't about him. So odds were the camera was still there, dead maybe, dusty, but still holding data. The next morning, I drove by the old house and parked across the street. Mason's truck was there, same vanity plate, of course. I waited until he left, then I walked up, calm as a person who'd finally decided they were done being scared in their own story. The camera was still there, tucked into the porch light housing. I popped it open, pulled the SD card, and left. Back home, I dug out an adapter and loaded the footage onto my laptop. Most of it was old, me bringing groceries, a landlord fixing something, a raccoon doing raccoon crimes. Then I found it, a clip dated the day my dad went into the hospital, timestamped about 2 hours after intake. Mason walked out the front door in a hoodie holding a clipboard. He paused, looked both ways like someone checking for witnesses, then got in his truck and drove off. It didn't show him signing the hospital form, but it placed him at the address tied to the fraud, at the exact time he would have needed to be there. And it proved something even more important. I wasn't. I saved the clip, backed it up, uploaded it, duplicated it like my life depended on it. Then I called Sarah and told her everything. She went quiet for a long time. "This is criminal," she whispered. That word hung in the air. Criminal. I wasn't dealing with family drama anymore. I was dealing with a person who would steal my identity and smear my name without blinking. Sarah didn't hesitate. "You need to expose him," she said. "Not just to the family, to the law." I didn't go nuclear immediately. I wanted every piece in place first, so I wrote a letter. Not emotional, not angry, just clean. I sent it to everyone who mattered in the extended family. Aunt Linda, Uncle Greg, cousins, and most importantly, Grandma Rose. Grandma Rose was the matriarch, the spine, the one person my dad still listened to. I explained everything. The dinner, the hospital calls, Mason's smear campaign, the fraud. I included screenshots, a timeline, the forged signature beside my real one, and the camera footage. At the end, I asked one question. If someone can lie this easily about his own brother, what else has he lied about? Then I waited. For a few days, nothing. Radio silence. I assumed most people ignored it, or sided with Mason like always. Then my phone rang. Grandma Rose. That might not sound like much, but in our family it was like receiving a summons from the Queen. Her voice was quiet and firm. "I read your letter, Connor." I held my breath without meaning to. "I believe you," she said. It hit me like a wave, not because I needed her approval, but because it was proof the story could change. "This isn't immaturity," she continued. "It's malicious, and I won't tolerate it." After that, the tide turned fast. Aunt Linda messaged me saying she'd always suspected Mason had a twisted streak. Uncle Greg asked for copies of the hospital documents. Even a cousin who used to laugh at Mason's jokes sent a message. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was like this. I didn't need pity, I needed eyes. Now they were open. I set up a private Zoom call with the relatives who responded. No yelling, no arguing. I walked them through the evidence calmly, like a professional presentation. I played Mason's voicemail. Just cleaning up your mess, little bro. When the call ended, there was a long silence. Then Grandma Rose said, this family deserves better. I didn't say it out loud, but I thought I do too. Sarah called afterward, voice tense. You're scaring him, she said. Mason? Yeah, he's texting people freaking out saying you're obsessed with him, that you're trying to ruin his life. I almost laughed. Of course he was playing victim. That's what people like Mason do when the narrative starts slipping. But it was legal. I filed the fraud claim with my bank, filed a police report, sent the documents to a detective, and because evidence doesn't care about charm, it started moving. Then, a week later, my dad called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Connor, I don't know what's going on between you and Mason. Your mother says it's gotten out of hand. I'd appreciate a chance to talk face to face. I listened twice, not because I missed his voice, because I wanted to hear if there was any ownership in it. There wasn't, so I didn't call back. I showed up instead, not out of obedience, out of strength. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I didn't feel nervous. That surprised me. For most of my life, that house made my stomach knot before I even stepped out of the car. Today there was nothing. No fear, no anger, just calm. Dad opened the door himself. He looked thinner, older. The hospital scare had taken something out of him that pride couldn't hide. For a second I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered his words at the dinner table, and the feeling passed. Connor, he said, clearing his throat. Come in. Mason was already there, pacing the living room like a caged animal. He stopped the moment he saw me. His face hardened, then shifted into something defensive, almost desperate. So this is it, he snapped. You gonna parade your little slideshow for Dad too? I didn't respond. I set my laptop bag on the dining table and sat down calmly, deliberately, the way people do when they know they hold the upper hand. My mom hovered near the kitchen, eyes darting between us, hands worrying the edge of her sweater like she could knit reality into something softer. Dad gestured for Mason to sit. He didn't. Dad looked at me. Explain why the family's being dragged into this. I nodded. I will, I said. But first, I want to be clear. I didn't drag the family into anything. Mason did. I'm just done covering for it. Mason scoffed. You've always been dramatic. I opened the laptop, clicked play. The security footage filled the screen. Mason in a hoodie, clipboard in hand, timestamp visible. Dad leaned forward. My mom covered her mouth. What is this? Dad asked slowly. This is Mason leaving the address tied to the fraudulent hospital intake, I said. The same address used when my name and card were attached to your medical bills. Mason laughed, sharp and forced. That doesn't prove anything. I clicked to the next image, the intake form, the signature enlarged beside mine. Forgery, I said. Ask any handwriting analyst. His laugh died. I played the voicemail next. Just cleaning up your mess, little bro. You're welcome. Silence swallowed the room. My mom sat down hard. My dad's face went pale, then red, then pale again. Mason opened his mouth, then closed it. I didn't stop. I showed them the text where Mason spread the will lie. Screenshots from group chats where my name got dragged. The bank correspondence. The detective's email confirming the investigation. When I finally closed the laptop, the house felt heavier, like the walls were holding their breath. Dad looked at Mason with something I'd never seen before. Not pride, not indulgence. Disbelief. You used your brother's name, he said quietly. You committed fraud. Mason snapped, voice rising like a cornered animal. I was helping. You were in the hospital. Someone had to take care of it. Connor never does anything for this family. That was his last card. His final desperate attempt to keep me in the scapegoat role. I stood up. I've spent my whole life doing things for this family, I said, voice steady. I just didn't do them loudly enough for you. Then I turned to my dad. And you taught him that. Every time you laughed at his jokes about me. Every time you called my work a hobby. Every time you stayed silent while he taught me down. You didn't just pick a favorite. You created a monster and called it leadership. My dad didn't respond. He couldn't. My mom started crying, not dramatic sobbing. The quiet kind that comes when someone realizes their neutrality was never neutral. I didn't know, she whispered. I looked at her. You knew enough. Mason stepped toward me, eyes wild. You think you've won? He hissed. You think this makes you better? I met his eyes. No, I said. It makes me free. 2 days later, police came to the house. Not for me, for Mason. Fraud charges, identity misuse, falsifying documents. The detective was polite but firm. Mason tried to spin, tried to charm, tried to blame me. It didn't work. Evidence doesn't care about personality. The fallout through the family was immediate and brutal. Aunt Linda stopped answering Mason's calls. Uncle Greg demanded repayment for money Mason borrowed years ago under business pretenses. Grandma Rose made changes, quietly, surgically. She removed Mason from any role of responsibility and assigned a neutral third party for anything involving family decisions. Dad didn't speak to Mason for weeks. When he finally did, it wasn't forgiveness, it was disappointment. And That, more than anything, broke Mason's illusion of being untouchable. As for me, I walked away. Not in anger, not in silence, with closure. I didn't agree to fix the family. I didn't become the glue again. I refused to be the person who holds a structure together while everyone else kicks the beams. I focused on my work. My channel grew, quietly at first, then faster. My business doubled. I moved into a new place. Bigger, brighter, entirely mine. Months later, my dad called again. This time, his voice was different, smaller, less certain. He apologized. Not perfectly, not with cinematic speeches, but genuinely enough that I could hear it wasn't just fear talking. I accepted it. Without reopening the door. My mom sends occasional messages now. They're careful, measured, respectful. And Mason, last I heard, he still tells people his brother ruined his life. Maybe he believes that. But here's the truth. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped being the family scapegoat. And when I finally walked away, I didn't take revenge with shouting or cruelty. I took it with the truth. And the funny thing about the truth is, it doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard.